crimes against humanity escalated in Burundi in 2017 and 2018, according to a United Nations human rights report revealed on Wednesday. The crimes were often whipped up by rhetoric from top officials, including President Pierre Nkurunziza. Burundian officials dismissed the report as lies. Burundi has tried and failed to stop the UN Commission of Inquiry in Burundi, set up by the UN Human Rights Council in 2016, and refuses to cooperate with the Commission. The Commission said last year that officials at the highest level were responsible for crimes against humanity. The Commission's latest report says there were reasonable grounds to believe crimes against humanity were continuing, including murder, torture, and rape. Burundi's Human Rights Minister Martin Nivyabandi says the report was misleading and insulting. Now, for more on the situation in Burundi, I'm joined live via Skype from United Kingdom, from Geneva, in fact, by Professor Francois Hampson, who is a member of the United Nations Commission of Inquiry in Burundi. Good evening, Professor Hampson.
Good evening.
Now, your commission says there are crimes that are being committed in Burundi, but the government says that is fictitious and that you're serving the interests of Western nations. What do you base your report on?
The Commission's work, like that of other commissions of inquiry, is completely independent and impartial. What we do is to interview people. I mean, we prefer it if we have access to the territory, but there is still plenty of possibility of interviewing witnesses, victims, people connected with the authorities in power, and a lot of the interviews happen in countries around Burundi, but it is also possible, given the means of modern technology, to interview people who are still in Burundi.
Now, are these tortures clearly sanctioned by the government, or do they say it's more committed by supporters of the system just because they perceive certain people to be enemies of the state?
The torture happens to people who either are or are perceived to be enemies of the state, but it's not just the work of lone mavericks. It's sufficiently systematic and it's carried out by state agents, so one is in a position to say that the state must know of what's going on in its name.
Now, what are your recommendations? What ought to be done to first stop what's going on and also to hold the country or the government accountable?
Well, the first recommendation, obviously, is that all parties involved in any form of human rights violation or abuses should stop at once. A problem that has existed for a very long time in Burundi is the problem of impunity. In fact, it was something addressed in the Arusha Accords, but the authorities haven't implemented those recommendations fully. And there's a dire need to address the issue of impunity, because otherwise there's a real risk of continuing cycles of violations of human rights law if nobody's ever held to account. And another recommendation on the part of the Commission of Inquiry is that our mandate should be renewed for a further year, because in the run-up to elections in 2020, there's a real concern that the current situation could get even worse.
So here you're talking about maybe referring Burundi to the Security Council, or perhaps recommending things like sanctions?
The situation in Burundi has already been before the Security Council for some years. In fact, only about 2 weeks ago, the Security Council unanimously adopted a resolution in which they expressed their concern at the prevalence of continuing human rights violations there. So the Security Council is already engaged.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Professor Hampson. And in fact, you're in the UK. I spoke to you yesterday when you were in Geneva. That's Professor Francois Hampson, who's a member of the United Nations Commission of Inquiry in Burundi.